So, Imla and Abi, I'm going to tell you a story, and then you can just have all the beautiful thoughts you want about anything. But this is what the sermon is about. The sermon today is about hope. I haven't told anyone that. The title of the sermon in the bulletin is The Rope, but the sermon is about something called hope. So there's a story the people in Greece used to tell. Now, Greece is about halfway between India and America. So today we're going to split the difference and tell a story about Greece. And here's the story. A long time ago, when there were hardly any people on earth, there was a beautiful box. It looked like a treasure chest. Tommy, do you know this story? You'll know it. And there's this woman, her name was Pandora. Oh, and she was curious about that box. She just wanted to open that box. She knew there was something incredible in that box. But she was told, Pandora, don't open the box. What do you think Pandora did? Yeah, she opened the box. When Pandora opened the box, all the troubles you could imagine spilled out. There were bugs that bite you in the summertime. There were places where you itch on your body and you can't even reach them to scratch. There were toothaches and headaches and backaches and heartaches. Everything that could ever go wrong. Getting your feet wet. It was all there. Food that doesn't taste good. All the troubles of life were there. They all came out because Pandora opened the box. But when all the troubles, sickness, illness, aging, when all of that came out, there was one thing left at the bottom of Pandora's box. How many people know this part of the story? Anita seems to. There was one thing left in Pandora's box. After all the troubles came out, hope came out. Because hope is equal and is a match for all the difficulty or trouble of life. Now, when we go downstairs afterwards, you probably won't stay for the business meeting. I hope you stay for lunch. I'm going to ask you what that story was about, okay? I may see you 20 years from now somewhere, and I'm going to ask you about Pandora's box and what came out last. And what hope is a match for anything. All right, so that's the sermon. The first thing to say is, did you hear the words Andrew spoke? The first line of Psalm 40 is, I waited patiently for the Lord. Doesn't that sound nice? Doesn't that sound religious? Couldn't that be on a Hallmark card? I waited patiently for the Lord. Well, it's interesting that Andrew referred to this as a Psalm of David. So could you imagine David in a situation? Let's go down a couple of lines. I was in a pit, right? Can you see David at the bottom of a pit like Joseph in that story? Now, do you think David was the kind of person who ever in his life waited patiently? Waiting patiently is what they hope you do at the doctor's office when they're keeping you for too long. But no one I know ever waited patiently. They may have pretended to. And in fact, this is a pretend translation. The Bible doesn't say, I waited patiently. That, again, the editors of the Bible are really interested in making everyone behave in church. So they always translate things in this nice, sentimental way. I waited patiently for the Lord. What it says is, I hoped in hope, O Lord. I hoped in hope. This is someone who says, the only thing I had left to hope in was hope itself. The only thing I had left to hope in was hope itself. Have you ever been in a desolate pit? Have you ever been in a miry bog? Well, Helen, you were supposed to nod yes. Well, maybe you've never fallen in a sinkhole. But yesterday at Briarwood, when I visited Tom Rossiter, that's exactly where he was. His words were, I didn't want to end up this way. In temporary but complete physical misery. To be in a desolate pit. And when you're in a desolate pit, sometimes the only thing you have to hold on to is hope itself. Not hope in, but just the idea that there's the possibility that something could change, that something could be different. Hoping in hope. In Hebrew, the word for hope is tikva. Some of you may have heard it once upon a time. There's a famous Israeli folk song, Hatikva. It means the hope. And the word for hope in Hebrew is also the word for rope. This is where I want to take you in your imagination this morning, to imagine a rope. To imagine the thing you hold on to when there's nothing else. That is hope. To imagine the thing that holds you when there's nothing else. The word for hope and the word for rope are the same. This person in the psalm is saying, can you see the rescue mission? He's holding on, or she, crying out, and then what does the Lord do? Pulls this person out of this pit and sets their feet upon a rock. There's something else I want to say about this, the fact that it's a psalm. Today we're in a psalm. Today we listen for God's word through one of the psalms. You know, one of the things about the psalms is they're very general. It says, I waited patiently. I know Andrew said that this is David speaking, but is David's name in the psalm? And then it says, he drew me out from the pit. Well, what pit? It reminds me of Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Well, I want to know, where is that valley? Because I want to avoid it. But see, the Psalms are general. The Psalms don't tell you it's Moses or Rachel. The Psalms just say I and you. The Psalms don't say what the valley is. They say it's just that lonesome valley that every one of us must walk. The Psalms talk about enemies and difficulties, but they don't tell you what those enemies and difficulties are. The Psalms keep everything general. And another thing about the Psalms take place in a different kind of time. In much of the Bible, everything is a link in the chain. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and then God said, "Let there be light." And then God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And then God called Abraham. And then God led the children of Israel through the Red Sea. And then. Everything in most of the Bible is a link in a chain. But the Psalms take place in a different kind of time. The Psalms take place at twilight and midnight. The Psalms take place in that kind of time you experience when it's late at night and you can't sleep and you think, oh, it's been hours, and then you look up and it's only been a few minutes. The Psalms take place in a different kind of time. I was reminded of that kind of time when I was at Tom Rossiter's bed this past week. Because most of us are in the time of stories, like most of the Bible. We're links in a chain. We've got something at 9, and then 10, and then 11. I see Mark, and I can't help but think of my brother, who's a lawyer, my twin brother. My poor brother, his life is completely divided by time. He's got it down to the 15 minutes. He's keeping track of time. Everything in his world is and then, and then, and then. But when I was at Tom Rossiter's side this past week, I was in a different kind of time. Because everyone had put aside their calendars. Everyone put aside their wristwatches. Everybody put aside their handheld calendars. Because now we are off the clock. We are keeping vigil. It's interesting that babies get born and people die in this other kind of time, when you can just throw the clocks away. Is it daytime? Is it nighttime? The baby doesn't care. Oh, but what's your due date? What do babies think about due dates? They don't care. They don't care whether it's the night shift or the day shift. They don't care whether it's a long weekend or a short week. And it's the same thing when you're at the side of someone who's at the threshold of mortality. It's just going to happen when it happens. It's a different kind of time. And that's the kind of time you experience in the book of Psalms. It's the time of being in a pit. It's a different kind of time. But you know, it's holy time by that bedside. Tom was there with his son Jim. His son Jim has been the person by his side all week. I asked Jim yesterday, I said, "Jim, when was the last time you were with your father so much?" Well, the last time Jim was with his father this much was when Jim was an infant. Just to be with someone for hour upon hour upon hour. The last time Jim was with his father this long, he was being cuddled and carried. Before he was old enough to move, to step onto that moving sidewalk of and then, got to go to school, then got something here, then got something there. So we're in that kind of time. Do you know what that, do you understand that kind of time? And now we're talking about hoping, holding on to the rope. You know, according to St. Paul, hope is one of the 3 great weapons in our spiritual arsenal. Faith, say them in the right order, Reverend. Faith, hope, and love. Faith, hope, and love. Another story. I've got all these stories from Tom Rossiter. So I have a lot of time to talk to Jim, his son. And yesterday was a dreary day. Do you remember that? The wet rain, and it was heavy. This is before it turned to snow in the morning. And I said, what a miserable day. And Jim said, yeah, but I've got a 3-year-old son. And on days like this, he says, oh, great, we get to jump in puddles. And that's hope. That's finding something to look forward to. And when you think about hope as a rope, you realize hope is a verb. Just like in 1 Corinthians 13, love is a verb. Love is something you do. It's not something you possess. It is an action. Love is being patient, being kind, forgiving, bearing. Hope is a verb. Hope isn't, you may say, oh, I don't have any hope. You don't? Well, you need to hold on. And it's okay. Sometimes the rope slips from your hands, but grab it again. Hope is a verb. It is holding on and refusing to let go. It is believing something could change. Something is going to happen. Somehow I'm going to get home. Dr. King talked about hope. Martin Luther King Jr., whose life we remember tomorrow. Dr. King said, everything that is done in the world is done by hope. And I was thinking about Anita this morning. Oh, you may not be aware of it. You must have a lot of hope. You are going to go to some place and you're going to let strangers do all kinds of things to you. You're going to let them put you to sleep and take knives. That's hope. The truth is, we live by hope. Every day, you are putting your hope in an incredible network of others, that they're going to do their job, just like you will do yours. Finally, when I was thinking about this rope of hope, it made me think about the whole story of being alive. Because as we begin life, we are connected by a rope. We are utterly secure. We are fed and nourished and sustained by a rope. But then this crazy thing happens. We have to get born. And what happens to the rope when we're born? And that's where we have to start exercising hope. That's where we begin to use our spiritual imaginations and believe there is another cord that sustains us and nourishes us and keeps us healthy and alive, and I'm going to believe and hope in it. And of course, that's the great task of faith, to believe in the cord you can't see, but which is just as vital to our being alive. The rope the rope. And finally, when you think about this image of hope as a rope, you must just ask, who's holding the other end? Sure, you grab on, but who's got you? Who's got the other end? And of course, in that respect, you think of hope as a lifeline. You think of the rope as a lifeline. But my final thought this morning is a different image of that rope. What if we take that cord, like in the Gospel of John, and say it's not a rope, it's a vine. It's a different kind of connector. And then we think of the way we are all bound together in the pumpkin patch of faith. It's not just that we're connected to God, but we are connected to each other. That our hope is that God's love has been poured out, has been spread out through the Holy Spirit. And so our final word for today is blessed be what? The tie. Blessed be the tie that binds our hearts in Christian love. Blessed be the rope. Blessed be hope.